Hello everyone, I'm here Tech Motorsports and it's Fender Flare time. Fender Flare time. So, funny story. So, as I took this project on, EW, we were back and forth, and his son JW, we're always looking at what we can do, how we can make the car handle better, run better, go faster, that kind of stuff. So we're always tossing ideas, what can we do? And one of the things that we always wanted to do, or we always talked about, but we always just took a step back, was the Fender Flares or a wide body kit. So we were looking at both options, and we always put it on the back burner because, we're like, well, it's just a lot of work. It's paint, body, cutting, you need new tires, new wheels, a lot of different stuff, to where we're just like, we'll just, concentrate on other stuff. So something happened at Daytona that pretty much opened the door for the Fender Flares. So let's take a look at what happened, and then we'll pick up here in a few seconds. Okay, so there she is. We got hit on the wheel behind me here. It bent the lower control arm, broke the axle, and that pretty much ruined our night. It was at 12:30 a.m. at the 24 hours of the HSR group that we were having at Daytona. About a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. So as you can see, it just it hit the wheel behind me, and also just scraped down the whole entire front or the entire side of the car, especially down in the rocker panel where it's metal, not where this is just the actual skirt itself. And then it actually messed up the front wheel because it's bent. Because once I turn it, I could see it, because one section rubs on the strut and the other section does not rub on the strut. So we technically have two bad wheels. So that was two things that we were looking at. Now we have to buy new wheels, we have to buy new tires, there's body work that needs to be done, and there she is, the door opens up. Hey, what about the Fender Flares, the wide body kit? So guess what happened? We started just searching what we could do, what we wanted to do. We didn't want to go extravagant and spend tons of money, but we also wanted to do it and make it functional. So we decided to come with the hard motorsports Fender Flares, and then we also had to look at the wheels that we were going to get, which they are the Arc8s. These are 17 by 10s. So these right now, we got it wrapped around some Hoosiers, and they're 275s, and they are meaty. Oh, they look so good. So I already went ahead and got this side done. I've already cut and welded and structured everything in the back. There is still a little bit of fit and finish I have to do on the flares themselves on this side. We'll get to that on the other side. There's a little bit more trimming that I want to do, which by looking at it, I'm going to trim the whole entire section off, so it's just going to be completely clean. And then I'm also going to mess with the bumper here. Now, when I first did this one here, I collapsed the whole entire suspension. So I removed the spring itself and jacked it all the way up. I'll show you a picture right here of it real quick. And so if you can see it, she's all the way up there, and where I was getting it to rub was right here on the corner of the bumper. So I have actually pulled this out a little bit to where there's just a little bit of a gap here. I don't want to pull it out too much because then it'll show a bigger gap, but we will figure that part out once we're at the body shop. So another thing that I'm going to be doing is grinding here a little bit more, and I may just maybe cut a little bit of this corner piece off right here, just to give us, if we need, to give us a little bit more clearance. But right now, the actual perch itself is completely slammed. The car, the way it sits now, it actually doesn't sit down here like like my chum car does. We'll take a look at that, and yep. So pretty much happy with this. These things, when they're on there, they're sturdy. I'm also using Allen heads and using nut inserts instead of using the rivets that came in a kit. The only downfall to this, especially on this race car, is the molding size here compared to the molding size on the Flares. I had to cut it out, and it just doesn't look all that great. The fronts we can deal with, just leaving them that. The back, if you don't trim it out on the side, it's going to protrude out and it's just going to leave a big gap here. And if you're a Daytona and you're on the embankment and you're doing 160, you don't want a little bit of a parachute here. So so I kind of cut that down just to make it a little bit flat, to flatten it and get it more closer to the actual body itself. So yeah, all right, so let's go to the other side and see how things are done. Okay, so here we are with the rear section. This is the one that's actually a lot more work. The fronts are very simple. You don't have to worry about the three sheets of metal back here. And then, so what I ended up doing is I marked my lines first, then I rolled it outside, grind all the race bondo off, and then kind of came back and started messing with the actual fender flare. So with the fender flare, this section here, which is for the M3 rubber molding, is really fat on this one to where it's thin on these. So if you use this on a non-M3, you would have that ordeal. So because we don't use the moldings on that, this little piece tends to be a pain in the butt. So what I had to end up doing with the rear ones is, if you look right here, I had to cut this. So if you look at the actual structure, it goes in. The chassis was hitting here on this one. So I ended up cutting it flat down here. Probably you can see it better. You have to cut it flat. So now it actually sits on the body nice and smooth. So to get to that point, what I end up doing is, let me run through, since I already got my stuff drilled. Okay, so pretty much what it's going to end up taking, and what I had to do is I just had to get it in place, find how I wanted this to sit. So there was a lot of fitment, a lot of looking, okay, if I have it pushed this way, if I have it pushed this way or that way, blah, blah, blah. So what I end up doing is, the key point that I end up taking, and I started with the other side as I did it with this one, was I looked at how this trim went down with the bumper. So I put it here, and it pretty much almost follows the flow of it. So I started and I left it there, which if you can see, I'm really close to it right there. And then I just went back here and started kind of getting it in place. This is before I started drilling anything. And then what I end up having to do is have to trim this piece out, which is for that stinking molding here. So once I get this trimmed out, she will sit nice where I want it in her slot. And then what I was able to do, then gauge it to see how much I needed to trim here, because I did have to trim now towards the bottom because of the rocker panel here. So once I was doing all that, I got to the point to where I'm like, okay, I'm getting it to lay on the actual body itself nice and smooth. So then I just picked one spot. Oh, before I go in there, so they are dimples where you drill these holes. So they're just not randomly, I didn't randomly do that. So there are dimples in there, and I went ahead and pre-drilled all these holes, so that way it's easier for me to just put my drill bit through that and go through the metal. Okay, so with that said, all my holes, all the little dimples have been drilled out, and so I just put it in the right place where I wanted, and I drilled straight through it. And all I did was just put one screw in place, and I started with this rear section. And then then I started making sure that it fits here, right where I want it. So that way the edge here and this piece are pretty much close to being dead on. So what I end up doing is making sure that that's where I want it. And then I just apply pressure, and then I drilled through this hole. And once I drilled through it, put my self-chapper through it. All right, so now it's getting tighter and it's moving less. And now this is where just the final little piece of the puzzle. And then just got it right where I wanted it. And I think this is it right here. There, and then there. So now I feel that it is in the right spot that I want, because with me using the nut inserts instead of using rivets, I want to make sure that my holes are pretty much right dead on, so that way I don't have any issues when I go put the screws in. So I feel happy with everything that is there. Everything's going to be lining up. My trim here still kind of forms, or the bumper itself with this section here, and then I was able to trim out my piece here, and I'm happy the way it sits. So then I go through and I drill the rest of the hose out. And then now with the fender flare being up there with no tape, it's actually held on. My holes that I'm going to be drilling are going to be a lot more spot on than it would be if you had tape and you just marked it as you went. So that's how I'm going to get up, how I got where I'm at with this. So now here comes the not so fun part, is cutting into the rear quarter panel. So let's get going with that. Okay, one thing that I failed to mention was, okay, so I created my lines when I went and bolted it on there, and I had my line here where I got all my hose, and then I went behind it and drilled another line to give myself plenty of room so that when I drill straight through it with a bigger drill bit, that I have enough meat left to where I could put my my nut inserts. So I'll have that, and as you can see, there's my line there. Now, because this fender has been rolled, so normally they're this way and it goes this way, the section here has been flattened all the way inside. So to cut it in pieces, I'm going to have to go and cut it here to get that section out, and I'll cut it here and I'll just go straight across. So that will get that section out, because there are, I think it's 3 layers of sheet metal in here that I have to go through. So I'll cut the outside one, and I'm going to leave the one behind there, because I'm going to use that later on, because once I get it to where I want it here, I will be hammering and getting it up further, and I want to have enough metal behind so that way I can tack onto that and then make it one whole strong structure again. So let's get to the cutting. Okay, so I got it all cut out, and I went ahead and took my wire wheel and cleaned the inside of this trim, so that way when I start to weld, it's already clean and it's not small. So I want to go ahead and clean that surface up. I didn't clean the whole entire thing just because I'm going to be cutting a lot of this off. So my next step is, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to pie cut these. So I'm just going to put slits all the way through this, and that's going to allow me to get the inside trim panel up further in there for more tire clearance. And so we're going to leave them just cut, and then we'll cut them off at a later point. So let's get to that. Okay, so one of the things I ended up doing was I went a little bit further past the where I end up cutting. Again, when I bang them up, I want to make sure that I can spread it up there enough to where it sits in there really good. Again, I'm just trying to gain more clearance out of the fender itself. So that's pretty much what I'm doing. So these pie cuts, yes, a little bit more work, but in all honesty, towards the end, this whole thing will be just super strong. So yeah. So the next thing to do is I am going to start removing the seam sealer, the undercoating underneath in the areas that I'm going to be welding. And once I get all that cleaned up, and then I'm going to start banging it and trying to get these to go up, and then I'll go in and start tack welding each one of these, and then I'll cut off the remaining access or the remaining sheet metal. Okay, so I got everything all cleared up. I even took the Bondo, the remaining Bondo off here, race Bondo, off the quarter panel. Cleaned all the seam sealer in the areas where I'm going to weld, pretty much from here to here, all the way on the back side, so that way it doesn't smoke up my my shop. And also earlier on I mentioned that there's 3 sheets of metal. The outside one, there's one inner, and then the outside one. So it sticks down a little bit. So what I end up doing with this one, because once you go in to hammer this, that third one, because it's tack welded to this sheet right here, it's going to hold you up. So I cut it from in here with my my disc cutter and just went all the way straight up, and then this remaining balance I end up doing here, or the remaining here on this section, I did it with my saw, and that way now she's gonna fold in so much more easier and so much more cleaner, and that way I could go ahead and start tacking all here. So that's pretty much what I got going next. Now that I got that cut, I am going to go ahead and spray my weld through primer in this area, so that way there is no chance of any rust, and then start smacking behind it and getting the inner well nicely formed and pushed up as far as I can. That way there's more room for the tire to compress up there without rubbing any of the sheet metal. So all right, so got it tack welded in place, and so the next thing I'm going to end up doing is I'm just going to cut these with my cutoff wheel, and then what I'm going to do is start welding them little by little, and yeah, get it all nicely done. So hang tight. All right, there she is. She's all complete. Got her all welded in, spot welded, and they took a while, just going in and spot welding all the sections, you know, little by little, going back and forth, spreading the heat around so that way it doesn't completely warp. So also did the back end where I end up cutting up there. I went ahead and tack welded those in place. That way she is definitely sturdy. I'll go back and seam seal both of the right side and left side rear sections. I'll go ahead and do that. This side and the other side, I have to cut out a piece of metal and tack weld that and get that closed up, and which I'll probably end up using those little pieces that I end up cutting off from here. And the next thing is going to be, or the next thing to do is going to be cleaning this up just a tad bit more and putting some etching primer on it, and then going through and adding my nut inserts for the fender flare. And at that point, I think my trimming is already done. So once I get that done, jump on the one on the front. So yeah, let's keep plugging away. Okay, so it's already been seam sealed. Got all that. I already went ahead and put all my my nut inserts in. For the flares. And another thing that I was going to end up doing is maximizing clearance. So on each fender flare, what I end up doing is this is the actual lip itself that comes out just sideways at a 90, and to gain as much clearance as possible, I went ahead and trimmed all of them off. I did that off camera because I had to use a razor blade and I didn't want to worry anybody. And it is yeah, you just got to be very careful when you do that, because I mean, I've been careful before and that razor blade has come loose, and I have cut myself before in the past. So yeah, just had to be careful with that. Just did it off camera, but got all 4 of them like this now. And the other thing that I had to do is I trimmed this section here so I could fit the fiberglass bumper here. So one of the issues that I was having as well is when the wheel would get to a certain compression and get it up there, which is probably not going to be as high because it was compressed up pretty high. And I wanted to make sure that this bumper on the inner side, there was a lip as well in there. I went ahead and smoothed that out, and just to gain as much clearance as possible. So as of right now, the next thing is just going to be bolted on, and this one is all done. I got my welded piece in here, so now it's all metal. And yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and get this put on, and then we'll jump on the front one. Okay, so when I got this flare installed, this one did not fit as good as the other side did. So I had to do a little bit of movement back and forth, and I got it in a position to where I felt it was a medium. I was giving a little bit and taking away, and so I think I got it in a good spot. What I came or what it came to was my bumper right here in this corner is actually hitting on the bottom side of the flare itself. So that's one thing about these plastic flares. There's one molding, and if there's been any damage repair to the body panels or bumpers, it's not going to fit as good as it should. So, but what I've got is, once I get everything all set up here, what I'm going to go back and do is I'm going to check my whole clearance of the wheel, and then what my plans are is, once I get it to a certain spot where I want it, and if this gap is a certain size, I'm going to shrink that gap by heating up and getting my heat gun and heating the bottom lip of the flare up and just pushing it up a little bit, and that way I'll close my gap up here. So those are going to be the little fit and finishes once I get everything all intact, all bolted down, all my wheels here, and then I could actually raise and lower the car completely and go from there. So at this point, let's jump to the front ones. All right, guys, I got ahead of myself, and the reason I got ahead of myself is this thing was not forming up correctly when I first just went to throw it on there and kind of get an idea and get ready to start moving forward. And the issue that I was having is this nose section up here up front that lies and covers up part of the actual kidney grill panel. It stuck out way too far out to the left, so it was a big old gap, like about an inch to inch and a half gap from the plastic, the further leading edge of the plastic to the kidney grill. It was just not forming correctly. So in all of that, I ended up taking the other side one, because the other side actually fits perfect, or I wouldn't say perfect, but it fits really good, really well. And the same thing with the rear one. And it's kind of funny how I started with the rear, went to that one was okay, that one was easier, went to the other side on the back end. That was a little bit more finessing that I had to do, and now I'm back to the last one, and this is just a pain in the butt. But so what I ended up doing is I took the other side off and compared it, and just to see how this was molded, and they do look identical, so I knew it had to be panel related. So unfortunately, this is a fiberglass panel, so I'm sure it's not sitting correctly. It's got race bondo pretty much on every corner. So yeah, so what I had to end up doing is I had all my holes already drilled, or most of them already drilled, because I was starting from the rear, working my way to the front. And what I ended up using was the actual indentation of the molding on the indentation of the molding on the fender. So I used that as my guide and started drilling from the back all the way around. So when I got to here and I was ready to get everything done, it was not fitting correctly up here. I had a big old gap. So what I had to do is just remove some of my screws that I think I stopped here. And then I had to remove this screw, and this one, and I kept this one here. And then that's when I then started from the front and worked my way back to the middle. By doing that, I created a big pocket up front. So in other words, my flare was not meeting flush with the fender. So that's where I had to release most of these, and now I have 2 extra holes. One, not bad. This one will be okay, because by the time I drill it and get the nut insert in, it'll be fine. So now that I got it all in place and right where it was flush all the way, this thing was just like going that way. And so what I had to end up doing is, once I got it all secured, the flare was on the fender, secured to the fender, and there was no gaps. That's when I took my heat gun and I started heating this section up and technically twisting it in towards the car. And my gap here now pretty much almost matches the front. So that's just one little tweaking that I had to do to this one. And that's why I got ahead of myself, because it just led one thing into another. I'm scratching my head. I'm like, what the heck? Really, the last one I'm having an issue with. So yeah, so that's where I'm at now. And I'm just going to go ahead and start finishing it up, figure out what I'm going to do next, and go from there. So let's keep plugging away. Okay, so next step is the rib nuts. So I've got my little time certs, little rib nuts here. So I'm going to go ahead and get that ball rolling. And the only thing you have to be careful is if you ever do this with fiberglass, you got to be very careful. You can pull these through, so you just want to do it gently enough to where it binds it, and you can start seeing barely want to like crush the paint a little bit, and that's where you want to stop. They will hold in place pretty well. Luckily it's just a fender, so it's not going to be anything that is very structural. It's just, you know, just the flare itself. So yeah, so I'm gonna get started with that. Much better. Okay, so she's all cut, and clean up a little bit of my mess while I was at it. And so yeah, now it's just, in all honesty, just bolt on the Fender Flare. As you can see now, earlier I mentioned that the wheel well will be sticking out, will be getting in the way a little bit. So what I'll have to end up doing is I'll have to cut on both sides. I have to cut it here, get this curved area out, and I will add this section or some plastic as well, depending on if I could get this one to get in there, and just add it from the flat side back and then rest it on the inside of the Fender Flare, so that way we don't get rubber boogers into the car and stuff. So yeah, so let's install the Fender Flare. So there we go, and I tell you what, oh gosh, that just looks so much better than it did before. I wish I would have taken a picture of it. Unfortunately, I was just like, day and night difference. That's all I gotta say. Day and night difference on how this fitted. And I guess, you know, it's not bad. I mean, I don't think it's the actual flare itself. It's just the panels where it meets. It's been in several incidents in its lifetime, and so yeah, so I was just able to work on it, and I'll tell you that makes me so happy that it came out that clean. So yeah, so at this point I'm not putting all my screws in, and the reason why I'm not putting all my screws in, plus I'm still working on fitment, on making sure that when the car is completely lowered and it's at the height that we want it, that when I rotate the wheels with the spacers that I have on, it's not going to rub anywhere on the inside. That's why I went ahead and just, while they were all out, I went ahead and trimmed the inside lip, because I just didn't want that to be hindering me at all. So yeah, so that's pretty much what I've got. And then where I was going with the actual screws themselves is the back section, because there's a racing bondo on there. When it goes to get painted and it gets repaired on the other side, so I'll have to go through and skim that, and that's where I just only going to put a handful of them in there. And I don't know how thick it's going to end up being, if I need to get longer screws, or the ones that I originally have will work. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. And I will pick this up once the car and all the wheels, once all the wheels are here and on, and I got them spaced out, and then I'll go through and touch base on what else I had to end up trimming to get the 17 by 10s with spacers underneath this chassis. So stay tuned for that section. All right, guys, so car's pretty much been done. It's at the collision shop getting the damage done. So I was able to get everything all situated at the right height and get it sitting a little bit better. Getting some clearance taken care of on the wheels while turning them. There's still a little bit more I have to do to it when it comes back from there, but I wanted to just get that done. So don't know if I'm going to have time to go through it again, as in to film, because once we get it in, we're going to try to go testing, and then we're supposed to end up having a race at the end of February. So hopefully we can get it all done. So filming is probably going to be put on a shelf, so that way I can make sure I have plenty of time to get everything all sorted out. So yeah, so like I stated, it's pretty much done. The flares are going to be painted, And so of course here are just the finishing pictures of the car sitting with the Apex wheels, 17 by 10s. The car looks so good. So here are a few pictures of the finished product. She looks so good, doesn't she? She looks really good. So we still have a few stuff we need to do to it. There was a couple items that were still on back order that have arrived, and so I'll be installing those, and then we still need to get alignment done, and we're probably going to go ahead and get a corner balance as well, but it depends on how much time we've got. Again, we do want to do a test day, and then we also, we have the race. So those are the things that we've got going on, which time is of an essence, and it took me a little bit longer than I was hoping for, but there was a lot, that wiring harness that I ended up doing, which I did wiring harness on the car, but I didn't go and film it because, well, I did do some footage on it, but it's just I don't know if it's going to be good enough to post, but we'll see. But like always, please like and subscribe, and hope to see you in the next video.